I thought we would start with a question that I think everybody needs to be able to answer. And I know certainly in a place like this, those of faith could probably answer, why is religious freedom important? But we also need to be able to tell our friends who aren't people of faith why it's important to them. So I'm going to start with one quick little 90-second video.
Some time ago, I had a conversation with a Marxist economist from China. He was coming to the end of a Fulbright fellowship here in Boston, but I asked him if he had learned anything that was surprising or unexpected. And without any hesitation, he said, yeah, I had no idea how critical religion is to the functioning of democracy. The reason why democracy works, he said, is not because the government was designed to oversee what everybody does, but rather democracy works because most people, most of the time, voluntarily choose to obey the law. And in your past, most Americans attended a church or a synagogue every week, and they were taught there by people who they respected. My friend went on to say that Americans followed these rules because they had come to believe that they weren't just accountable to society, they were accountable to God. My Chinese friend heightened a vague but nagging concern I've harbored inside that as religion loses its influence over the lives of Americans, what will happen to our democracy? Where are the institutions that are going to teach the next generation of Americans that they too need to voluntarily choose to obey the laws? Because if you take away religion, you can't hire enough police.
That's one of many arguments. I think very few people, to be honest with you, who aren't people of faith, understand the role of the church and the role of religious institutions in us having any freedom at all. And our founders understood this. They called religious freedom our first freedom, not just because it's in the first two clauses of the First Amendment, because our founders understood that if you lose religious freedom, you'll lose all your freedom. You'll lose your political freedom, you'll lose everything. What's been amazing is, as I speak around the country, I often have people come up to me afterwards that are from Eastern European countries. I'm thinking of one gentleman in particular, his name was Peter, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, you know, I'm not a person of faith, I don't believe like you do, but I'm a dual citizen of Czechoslovakia and the United States. He said, and I saw this happen in my country. And when we lost religious freedom, soon thereafter, we lost all of our freedom. And he said, so here's a check. He actually wrote a large donation, and he's been donating to us ever since. And he's not even a Christian. He's not even a person of faith, any faith. He just understands the importance of religious freedom to him having political freedom or any freedom at all. So this battle that we're talking about is much bigger than I think people understand. And it's why this should concern you. This is, we do a catalog each year of just all the attacks going on around the country. This is the one for the last year. And there's like 5 or 6 of these a page. I mean, this is everything from a 9-year-old boy who was caught praying over his meal and lifted out of his seat in the cafeteria and taken to the principal's office and told to never do that again, to senior citizens who actually had their federally funded meals taken away because they were praying over their meals and they said that would violate separation of church and state. It's in the north, it's in the south, it's people with resources, it's people with no money at all. It's you glance through this at all, you realize how pervasive the issue is. And some years, one year to the next, this is doubling. You can, if you want, anytime, not that you'd want to print it out, but you can go to our website, you can download this, you can look at all this. Just look and get a feel for what's going on. This is a symbol that we're in danger of losing our freedoms. And I'm not just talking about religious freedoms. And so it's very important that we have this kind of discussion, that we have laws like were just passed. But let me tell you, this was before the Supreme Court decision. And now a whole new number of attacks are about to be, I'd say about to be, but they're actually already unleashed. And so I just want to tell you about a few of them in the few minutes we have, and then talk about why, although that you should be aware of this, you shouldn't be discouraged, and that there are things that you can do to really be ready for what's coming. And that is, Jonathan hinted to one already. And look, this decision talks about what the government can do, that the government can't say that marriage is only a man and a woman. But that's not what the decision ultimately is really about for those who are behind the decision. They didn't want just a victory for so-called same-sex marriage. They wanted to use this, and they're trying already to use this as a tool to attack people who disagree on the issue, to punish people who have different views. Nothing could go more against what our country is about. But in the oral argument itself, the Solicitor General of the United States was asked, you know, if we create this new federal constitutional right to gay marriage, then what do we do with all the institutions that have tax-exempt status, and they would now be discriminating because they would disbelieve that? Would we have to take away their tax-exempt status? That was the question asked to the Solicitor General. Everybody expected the Solicitor General to say, oh, we're not going that far. But the answer from the Solicitor General of the United States was, quote, that will be an issue. Very similar question was asked about colleges and universities that were Christian or religious. I mean, are we going to have to strip them of accreditation? Are they, you know, because now they're federal discriminators if we hand down a decision like you're asking. Again, the answer from the Solicitor General was, that will be an issue. And that's already started. I don't know if many of you have already seen the statements. Within 2 days, Time magazine came out with an editorial that religious groups who had a belief that marriage is a man and a woman should voluntarily give up their tax-exempt status. Shortly thereafter that, the argument is now being made that anyone who gets a federal loan to go to college should not be able to have those loans or grants if they go to a religious college that believes that marriage is a man and a woman. And it goes further than that. Think of the people you listen to on the radio or you watch on TV that are either ministers or ministries. How can you allow people to have an FCC license to be on the air if they're engaged in discrimination against a new federal constitutional right? This is exactly what happened in Canada. When they had their same-sex marriage decision, very soon thereafter, and it's still this way today, it is against the law to be on the air in Canada and to take an opposite position on this issue. And this is exactly what will be argued. In fact, it's already begun to be argued in the United States. But it goes really further than that. And again, I could do a long list of these, but I just want to deal with some things so that people understand, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I don't really care. Well, what they do, you know, it's not going to affect me. And the truth is, oh yes, it's going to affect you. If you have any connection to any ministry with tax-exempt status, if you have any connection with any colleges, universities, we can go down the list, child welfare, child adoption. But the last one that I think helps people understand is it's going to affect you if you work or if you know anybody who works. Why do I say that? Let me give you a few examples, and I bet you've heard about these. What about the Christian bakers? The Christian florists, the piano players, the photographers. I mean, of course, you got the Kleins from Oregon who, again, served these two lesbian women that came. They were happy to bake cakes for them and whatever they wanted. But then they said, we want you to do our marriage cake. And they said, well, we're sorry, but we can't do that. That would violate our faith because it would have us be affirming something as marriage that our Lord says is not. But you can go down the street. It's not very far. There's another baker. They'll do a wonderful job. Well, of course, they went to the government. The government then prosecuted this Christian couple. And at this point, their business is now closed. It's bankrupt. And they've been fined $250,000 for causing mental distress to these two lesbian women because they would not bake them a wedding cake. Now, there's going to be appeals on that, but that's the decision. But that, I mean, I could sit here and tell you about these kinds of cases all day. I could tell you about the woman, Baronelle Stutzman, 72-year-old grandmother, in the state of Washington, who had no problem providing flowers to the two gay men, and in fact she loved these men. But then they came and they said, we want you to arrange our flowers in our wedding. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that because of my faith. She explained that. Their response was, again, to go to the government and to have her prosecuted. And the ruling at this point in that case is, if she loses, they can not only come after her business, but they can come after her home. A 72-year-old grandmother who could lose her home because she won't arrange flowers for a gay wedding. Now, when I was on Fox News Sunday about 4 weeks ago with the head of the Freedom to Marry movement. He said, oh, we're for religious freedom. We don't want to take anybody's religious freedom away. And I started repeating these cases. You know what his response was? Oh, well, that's commerce. So what that means is you have religious freedom if they get their way, as long as you don't leave your home or your church. But as soon as you step into public, now you don't have any religious freedoms, because whatever they want as freedom trumps your religious freedom, your right to disagree. And so it's not just you think, well, hey, I'm safe. Nobody in my family has anything to do with any of these things that connect to weddings. Well, you're not safe. If you've been watching the news at all, you'd find that almost every week now we are filing a lawsuit on behalf of someone who has lost their job, not because they've done or said anything at work, but because somebody at work finds out where they go to church or what their personal beliefs outside of work are, that marriage is a man and a woman. We're representing a man by the name of Eric Walsh, who is director of Public Health, City of Pasadena, California. Incredible guy, incredible record, and the state of Georgia said, we want you to come be our director of public health for a third of the state. And he said, I accept. And then a few days later, some people called the state of Georgia and they said, you need to check out where this guy goes to church. You need to look into this. We now have copies of the emails from the government officials divvying up his sermons at his church to decide which government official would review which sermon, after which the next day they fired him because his church believed things like that marriage was a man and a woman. And I want you to think about this. It's not because he was fired, not because of anything he did at work or said at work, but because of what was said in his church on a Sunday about marriage being a man and a woman. But it goes further than that. Think of the professions. And I mean, almost everything is a profession. Doctor, lawyer, teacher, real estate. I mean, you get licenses, right? They all have codes of ethics about what you can and you can't do. And the attempt has already started to take the Supreme Court decision and to put that into the codes of ethics, where you would then be forced to choose between your belief, your religious beliefs on marriage, or your career. This is exactly what's happened in other countries. Now, I tell you about all these things not to say, boy, I'm really glad I got to go to the church and be depressed the other night. I'm telling you this because these attacks are not, theorized to come. They've already started. I mean, I could tell you cases on all of these things. But that doesn't mean they're going to win. The law is not on their side. Even the Supreme Court case itself on same-sex marriage had a specific paragraph towards the end of the opinion that says, finally, and it turned and it basically said, look, while we're saying that states or governments can't say that marriage is only a man and a woman, the First Amendment fully protects both in free speech and freedom of religion people to disagree, to follow their faith, and even to advocate for the opposite of this. So essentially what you have the Supreme Court saying, and it's really all 9 justices if you count up the justices in the different parts of the decision, they're saying this decision cannot be used as a weapon to punish people who disagree or have different beliefs on marriage, and marriage being a man and a woman. Now, we're going to shove that down their throat over and over again in all these cases. But we're going to have to fight these cases. And these cases are coming. And so I don't want anybody to be shocked by that. Now, the good news is we have a method of dealing with these types of cases at Liberty Institute. We have volunteer litigators who are literally the best litigators in the country at the best law firms in the country, and they all donate their time. This is their way to give back to the body as Christians. This is a way they can use their talents. And again, these are top people. And as a result of that, if you look over the past 12 years, we've very consistently, over the past 12 years, our win rate has been above 99%. So the issue is not whether we can win these cases. The issue is not whether we can win. The issue is whether people are going to be willing to stand up. Because if they are, we can win these cases, and we will win these cases. Now, one of the things that every pastor, every church, every ministry should be thinking about, and unfortunately many have not, is are they ready for these things to come to their church, to their ministry? I can't tell you, we could call every day now, with somebody who's something, and they go, we never thought this would happen to us. It's real simple though. We've got on our website and let me give you the background first. It used to be that many ministries, churches were told, just be real vague in your legal document. You know, don't say Jesus a lot or it might cause trouble and people might be upset and you might be radioactive, cause a lot of attention to yourself. Well, that might have been good advice 20 or 30 years ago, but it's not the law and it's not the way to do things now. For many years now, it's been clear that if you want to argue as a defense an important religious belief of your church, of your organization, then it better be in your legal documents. That's exactly why, if you look at the Hobby Lobby case and why this Christian-run for-profit business won, they were very specific in their documents about sanctity of life, about why they believed that, about how that connected to the core of their organization, with even the scripture verses to back up. They had that laid out. Every church, every ministry needs to do that same thing. Now, a lot of people have started to do this, and they've started to work through that language. And we've tried to make it as easy as possible for people. So one of the things I would encourage you to either write down or remember, go to our website sometime at libertyinstitute.org, and you can either do /audit, AUDIT, it's a legal audit. So libertyinstitute.org /audit, or you can just go to the libertyinstitute.org, go about halfway down, and you'll see a picture of a church with sunlight coming from behind it with a question that says, are you protected? You can click on it. It will take you to a special place in our website where you can click if you're a church or a Christian school or a nonprofit, and it will list for you, here are the legal documents that you need to look at to see that they have these things in them. And then the bottom half are templates that others have used that have worked through these issues that you can then say, okay, my theology is more fitting here and I can make a few changes, but everybody can take their core issues, they can place those in their document and they can become exactly who they are and make that clear so that when they are attacked, they can actually use those beliefs as a defense because those are true beliefs. So everybody, and I bet everybody in here, number one, you're connected to some church. Has your church done this? You're connected to some nonprofit. Has your nonprofit, ministries that you're connected to, have they done this? Are they protected? That's going to be very important as these lawsuits start around the country. In fact, they've already started. So there is a way to do this, but we have to be willing to stand up, and people need to be prepared. And of course, they need to call us when they have any of these problems. I'll just say this, the most common lie that people are told is that you're just one person and you can't make a difference. Almost all of the major cases, the major movements, it's about, what we see in our cases, a whole community is being attacked and everybody looks around and wonders, is anybody going to stand up? One person stands up, and when they do, the whole community stands with them and everything changes. Changes are not made by majorities. They're made by committed minorities, and then the majority follows. And so we're at that time in history of, we're really coming full circle. And that is, this country was founded by people who left because they wanted to have religious freedom. They wanted to be able to have a belief that was different from the government and to be left alone. Isn't it interesting how we're now back to that same issue? Are people going to be allowed to disagree with the government and the new position they've taken or are they going to try to force this on people and say you can't dissent? I'm a real believer that not only is the law and everything in this country supportive of the right to dissent, of the right not to be punished because you have a different belief, but I think it runs through the blood and the DNA of every American. And I think this idea that they're going to be successful in forcing and having the government force people to believe or be punished is never going to be successful in this country, as long as we're willing to stand up. And I want to show you an example of that, people that have no power, that change everything. Let's take the girls down in Koontz, Texas. These are 14, 15-year-old girls. What power do they have? But they thought, we want to do something different. We're tired of kill and mash the other team on our signs. We'd like to do something encouraging. And one of them said, Scripture's encouraging. And so on their homemade signs with their money and their paint, they started putting things like, if God is for you, who can be against you? You can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. Well, everybody loved it, especially the other team. They said, hey, they're not saying kill or maim us anymore. And everything was going great until a letter comes from across the country from the Freedom from Religion Foundation saying, you stop these girls from mentioning God or we're going to sue you. Well, the superintendent makes an announcement over the loudspeaker that any student who mentions God at the football game is going to be punished. So we have to come in, represent the cheerleaders. We end up winning. We won at the district court. Believe it or not, they've appealed. It's now at the Texas Supreme Court, and the ACLU has joined the school district and still fighting against the rights of these kids. But what I love is how these powerless girls, what happened? You know, they've been in the New York Times 4 times. They've been in the Wall Street Journal 4 times. They were in the LA Times 3 times, and the last time, that article ended with a scripture verse, so I'm sure that reporter's been let go. They were on CNN. Last I looked, their Facebook page had 61,000 Facebook fans, and they live in a city with 1,200 people. And what is even more fun to watch is what happens to them individually as they're in a situation, they're tested, and the question is, are they going to stand? Are they going to represent their Lord? And what's going to happen to their life as a result of that? And I'm just going to show you one 90-second interview with just one of those cheerleaders.
How many people get the chance to represent such great ideas, you know? How many people get the chance to really fight for these things? Because it's easy to sit on the side and say, man, I wish that would happen, and I wish we had that, and I wish they would do that differently. But how many people actually get to be the person to take action? I mean, this is something I'm going to be proud of my entire life. It's becoming part of who I am, realizing that what I say has value and worth, even on a national, international level. Little small town girl. It means something to people. They care. Because of everything that I've been through, I've kind of been exposed to this whole world of law and litigation that I would never have the opportunity to know about before. And because of that, I've discovered that I have a real interest in it. And now I'm like, I'm going to be a lawyer. Because I have people step in and basically be little knights in shining armor. Mr. Starnes and Liberty Institute come in and tell me this is what's going on and this is what you can do to make it right. And I want to be that for other people. Something that's been our theme throughout this, it's been the base, the principle of what we're doing. And I believe that sometimes people get sidetracked from is that it's about God. It's to God be the glory, it's for God, it's for Him. The scriptures are from the Bible because that's what we believe and that's what we think we should live by. We know we should live by, and we want other people to have that same opportunity to live by those ideals and morals. If it hadn't have been for this case, it would have been a few thousand people that would have seen the scriptures, but because we have faced opposition, now the whole world has seen the scriptures. It's been exposed so much more, so we still have to give praise even through the hard times.
Gives you hope for the future. And I think what the Lord is asking us is, are we willing to be Ashley when we get our opportunities? Because we're going to get them. We're in the time of Joshua 1 where God said, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. They ended up in the promised land, but they had to be strong and courageous. So we need to be ready to be Ashley. And when Ashleys come under attack, we need to be ready to stand with them. And so be ready, and I'm glad you're here, and you let us know if we can ever help you. That's why we exist. Thank you.